that will be of use to everyone. Now, you will see a link for all of the materials, presentations, bios, etc., of all of our guest speakers. My name is Diego Herrera. I am a lead specialist on financial markets with the Inter-American Development Bank. I'm in charge of leading all of the FintechLAC work to foster the development of a digital financial inclusion ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. This time, we have been able to put together an excellent event with representatives from the industry and the financial regulators and supervisors to speak about a very important issue to our region, which is open finance. As you'll hear later, this is part of the 2025 vision of the IDB. Without further ado, let me now extend a warm welcome to you to our event, Open Finance, a Path to Financial Innovation in Latin America and the Caribbean. We will hear first from the manager of the Institutions for Development sector at the IDB, Susana Cordeiro Guerra.
To the Institutions for Development Manager at IDB, Mrs. Susana Cordeiro Guerra. Mrs. Guerra served between 2019 and 2021 as the president of the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE. Before this position, she was an economist at the World Bank, where her work focused on research and impact evaluation of projects in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Earlier in her career, she conducted field research and analysis on the impact of fiscal decentralization and service delivery in East Asia. Mrs. Guerra has a PhD in political science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and a master's in public administration and international development from Harvard Kennedy School. She's also an undergraduate degree in social studies from Harvard University. No further ado, welcome, Mrs. Guerra. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning to all. Thank you, Diego, for such a kind introduction. I'm delighted to welcome you today to the FintechLAC's webinar, Open Finance, a Path to Financial Innovation in Latin America and the Caribbean. FintechLAC is a regional public goods initiative funded by the IDB. It is the only public-private group of fintech of the region, as Diego described, and it consists of a group of financial regulators and supervisors and fintech associations from over 15 countries. The objective of FintechLAC is to support the development, the consolidation, and the integration of a fintech ecosystem in the region through the promotion of policies and regulations, as well as the institutional strengthening for ecosystem actors. The intention is to seek regulatory convergence for harmonious development of the fintech ecosystem with benefits such as scalability of platforms and coordination between financial authorities. FintechLAC's work and the topics especially covered today in this webinar support Vision 2025, Reinvest in the Americas, the IDB's blueprint for economic and social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. With this in mind, FinTech is focused on meeting the needs in the region in the following ways. Through Open Finance, FintechLAC supports the implementation of public policies that foster innovation and build institutional capabilities across the financial sector. The fintech ecosystem has grown significantly and now includes over 2,300 platforms across many different countries. Innovation knows no boundaries in a region full of talent like Latin America. Micro, small, and medium enterprises account for over 95% of businesses in the region and employ 70% of the region workers. Yet, they face a tremendous financing challenge. According to data from our joint studies with the University of Cambridge, fintech platforms provide 86% of the alternative financing for MSMEs. Open finance allows greater access to and use of financial services by the same group. Evidence shows that the digital finance supports gender equity and inclusion in the region and promotes broader economic empowerment. Fintech platforms are also developing throughout the region, are fostering greater integration. They promote cross-border regulatory sandboxes and innovation hubs with a single, well-known regulated gateway. As a result, the digital financial ecosystem can test innovations to initiate dialogue with financial regulators and supervisors, thus increasing financial activities across countries. This is a rapidly developing sector. We hope that FintechLAC's work around regulation and strengthening institutional capacity will help advance Vision 2025 as it promotes digital financial inclusion and open finance ecosystem in the region. Today's event features two exceptional panels with leaders from major fintech companies in the region. These conversations will explore the current state of open finance and its key drivers. Our guests will share their experience on the demand for financial services and the innovation potential within the sector. Our first panel, Expert View on the Current State of Open Finance 101, offers valuable industry insights. Eduardo Coelho, Regional President from Latin America and the Caribbean of Visa. Paula Reggi, COO of Mercado Pago, Argentina. Jimena Aleman, co-founder and COO of Prometeo Open Banking, Mexico. Federico Suarez, Senior Vice President for Latin America, Open Banking Exchange, UK. These sectors cover market infrastructures, big tech, open finance, and offer a global viewpoint. Our panelists will explore the inner workings of open finance and the ways in which it can promote financial inclusion across the region. Our second panel, Key Drivers of Open Finance in Latin America and the Caribbean, features Felipe Rincon, Vice President of Public Policies for Latin America and the Caribbean, MasterCard. Rosario Celedon, Advisor, Ministry of Finance, Chile. Gilberto Perez, Head of Regulation, National Banking and Securities Commission, Mexico. And Angel Sierra, President of Fintech Iberoamerica and Fintech Chile. A few noteworthy points about this panel. The Ministry of Finance in Chile has advanced a bill on open finance with the support of the IDB and FintechLAC. The National Banking and Security Commission of Mexico will further advance its open finance implementation with FintechLAC's collaboration. MasterCard is one of the most important financial infrastructures in the region, and the Iberoamerica Fintech Association represents the fintech sector's regional interests. So it's a robust panel all around, including multiple viewpoints from the industry, and we are fortunate to have you here today. This panel aims to highlight policy and industry views on open finance implementation. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and recommendations on formulating policies that foster the open finance ecosystem, both locally and globally. Open finance is a very dynamic and space and is undergoing tremendous change over the past, specifically five years. Many countries already have vibrant ecosystems based on APIs in their financial systems. For example, Brazil, with their recent application of PIX and its centralized payment systems, and Mexico with the implementation of the Fintech law. In these implementation efforts, it has been essential to harness coordination among key stakeholders to tackle identity and data sharing challenges. Public policies that foster growth and institutional capabilities for transferring data will further incentivize financial inclusion in the region. To that end, the IDB and FintechLAC are committed to digital financial inclusion throughout these countries. Before our program starts, I'd like to highlight a few of the FintechLAC's contributions towards building an open finance ecosystem in the region. Just recently, Chile has taken significant steps with the Fintech law bill that proposes a legal framework for fintech companies in the country. We directly supported these efforts and the fintechs, and specifically the Fintech Task Force in this successful endeavor. We're also lending support to the Mexican National Commission of Banking and Securities in its efforts to implement open finance for credit institutions. This is a tremendous effort that will advance the development, consolidation, and integration of the open finance ecosystem in the country. Lastly, we're working on a report outlining regulatory and policy gaps, guidelines, and recommendations for the implementation of open finance in the region. This report, due to be released in early 2022, is guided by the FintechLAC's Steering Committee. The committee is headed by the Argentinian Securities Commission and regulators from Colombia, the Dominican Republic, and Panama, as well as the Ibero-American Fintech Association representing the private sector. This is, above all, a collaborative effort, and we welcome input from the industry and regulators. And for this panel today and this forum that we have created is essential. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope these panels will spark interesting conversations and discussions, and they will offer insights and new approaches as we reflect on the challenges in our region. Welcome, bem-vindos, bienvenidos. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Susana. These were incredible words to welcome all our audience. I'm going to go back to Spanish again. Por favor,
please click on the globe at the bottom of your screen where you will be able to choose the language of your preference.
The lower bound of your screens, you can choose the language of your preference. We're going to start with a session.
We will begin in Spanish.
El día de hoy, como lo comentaba Susana.
As Susana was saying, today we will have two panel discussions. The agenda and all materials are available by clicking on the link in the chat to the right of your screen. If you are using a computer, you'll find it to your right. If you're on your cell phone, it will be to the right as well. So the first panel discussion is the Open Finance Ecosystem Expert View on the Current State of Open Finance 101. This panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Juan Antonio Ketterer. He is the head of the division of the Connectivity, Markets and Finance division at the IDB. I will now yield to him to moderate this first panel discussion. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Mr. Ketterer, and please proceed. Good morning, everyone, and I apologize for this very last-minute change in the agenda, but these things do happen at this time of year. It's a very busy time for us. That's when we're finalizing our operational plan. And I'd like to thank Diego and all of you for being flexible enough. Now, as to the operational plan, at the IDB, aside from what we heard from the manager, Ms. Susana Guerra, our division is fully committed to the work done through this platform, which to us is the most important and a major platform in the region. So I thank you so much for joining us, because platforms are just as powerful as the participants make them. Without you, this platform would not be as valuable as it is. Now, going back to the work at hand, let us begin with an overview of the infrastructure of this very important, significant industry. Well, of course, without infrastructure, nothing could work. So we have four panelists who have already been introduced. I won't repeat what was already said by Diego, but in the interest of time, I will just turn it over to Eduardo Coelho. He's the regional president for Latin America and the Caribbean of Visa. He'll have 7 or 8 minutes to share some thoughts with us. Thank you, and you have the floor, Eduardo. Eduardo, your microphone is off. Now we can hear you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for Juan, Diego, and thank you to the IDB for inviting us to join with you what we're doing at Visa and how we view open finance. Throughout the pandemic, we saw consumers turn more to digital channels, and that has sped up the adoption and changes in consumer behavior, and also ever-growing interest by investors and entrepreneurs in coming up with solutions through technology to bridge the gap in terms of access and inclusion in Latin America. Generally speaking, we see how the ecosystem is expanding based on 3 major aspects. Number 1, data, which is how to gain more interoperability and access to data. Number 2, capacity building. This has to do with the infrastructure that is needed for connectivity to be in place and for new and emerging players to be able to connect these new capabilities to solutions that are already in place without delay. And thirdly, experiences through data and these new capabilities and capacities. How can we customize these experiences for the consumer, the end user in general? This is what we see as an open ecosystem. At Visa, we are focusing more on open banking, however. And open banking, to our mind, means that banks make it possible to have third parties access their platforms on behalf of the consumers, so that the consumer's information is visible and relevant, so that the consumer can receive more tailor-made offers and services. And these can come in different ways, maybe through a better experience with currently existing already products. But what we see with great interest in Latin America is how this can cover segments of the population who were not included in, especially informal financial services in the past. In Latin America, without a doubt, everybody has access to financial services. However, many people, especially in certain swaths of the population, do it informally, where the cost of credit is very high and there is no security for your savings. So our major challenge as a region is to bring in these persons through technology to be closer and benefit from the democratization of the financial services in the region. For us at Visa, open banking is a natural step forward in the history of Visa of over the last 70 years. Actually, in terms of our history, Visa over the last 60 years became a platform connecting sellers and buyers under a common railway that was interoperable and safe, secure, to allow a business through credentials that used to be distributed in a piece of plastic or metal to be able to identify the consumer. So our DNA, our tradition, and at the core of our business is naturally one that will allow for us to work towards enhancing this connectivity. We have opened up the capacity of our own networks through the development of APIs. We have over 400 APIs available for the developers and community, and anybody else who wants to leverage our capabilities as a network. And that is why we are facilitating this interaction with other operators. We have opened up our platform through APIs, and also we have reached out to the entrepreneurial community, especially the fintech community. It's interesting to see that over the last 5 years, Visa has been hosting the Visa Everywhere initiative. It's a global event that started with the regions through Visa, and over the last 5 years, we've seen over 1,000 fintech presentations of their projects, and every year there is a winner in the region that receives support from Visa, especially by connecting it to the rest of the ecosystem, payment, business, etc., trade. Last week we had the finals, global finals, where the regional winners attended, and the Latin American representative, Finedo, a Mexican fintech, came in second globally. And what they're doing is to very quickly develop through APIs and other connectivities the capabilities for those interested in open banking to be duly connected through their value proposals and offer them to consumers. So what we do at Visa is to have an interoperable and secure network with open connectivity for those who are developing these solutions and promoting various fintechs, and to help them gain some scale. And this is how we're contributing to this. In closing, the way in which we are contributing as a network for payment, this is how we're contributing, and also as an organization that has been working hard for many years on interoperability to allow for growth and for this network effect to actually be attained. And the more suppliers or bidders we have on a network, the more valuable will become. So the more fintechs we have involved in a network, the more will grow, and the more integration there will be between the traditional systems and the players who have been in the business for a long time, and the more new players will come in. And that's something we've seen with great interest. And good luck, and please proceed with the panel. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation, Eduardo. I really liked what you said about the network, and this is an absolute truth, and it's very important for all of us to work towards that. We will also hear about payments from Paula Arregui. As you know, she's the Chief Operating Officer at Mercado Pago in Argentina. That's one of the most interesting new companies, non-traditional companies, but a new player on the market. I don't think she needs much of an introduction. Let me give the floor to Paula.
Thank you, Juan. It's a pleasure to share this panel with all of you. I was just thinking about three substantives or three nouns that I could use in order to describe the development of the sector in Latin America and how our companies, payment companies, have come all the way to this point. And we've become much more sophisticated in the production of all the other financial products. As Eduardo was saying, thinking about inclusion and serving maybe all those who were not really involved in this plan, digital plans and accessible financial activities for all. And I believe that the three stages that have taken place begin with one first stage that I would define with the noun of equality. It seems to me that there was a regulatory stage where we've seen the emergence and the occurrence of new participants. They were not at play in the past, and where the regulator has attempted to even out the picture so that we can have the presence of traditional participants as well as alternative participants. We've seen a second stage, and I believe that we can describe this adequately with this concept of instantaneous communication interoperability, something that emerged in Mexico, CODI, as a means of payment that is offered by the industry, where we start using these balances, banking balances, non-traditional entities such as fintechs that have to interoperate amongst them, and where the balance has to be available for online payments. We have PIX in Brazil. Undoubtedly, to me, by far, it's been one of the greatest successes in implementation. 3.0 transfers in Argentina, pursuing very similar objectives. And this third phase of open finance, I believe that is adequately described with the concept of competitiveness. There's more competition, there is more supply and offers for the people who now own the information, who decide the interface that will be used by the main core of their finances. And we have to understand that this not only brings with it a regulatory change, but an opportunity in our region to rethink finances with innovation, with new skills, with a blend of supply, convenience, brand lab experience, which can truly bring a completely new way of doing things. Internally, we found inspiration with these new occurrences, with this innovation that for us is in our genesis from the very beginning, in which we invented ourselves and we started developing values propositions in Latin America. And we're inspired by an article that we saw in The Guardian, where it tells us that people nowadays are much more married in number of years to their bank, much more than to their partner. And this speaks of the difficulty that so far has represented bringing about a change, a disruption in the election of the financial entity that will serve that need and that day-to-day for people. So we feel that this brings to the table a huge opportunity for companies that maybe could not do a few things in the past, and now they can start doing these things, for companies that perhaps offered some services and now they can offer much more these services, but in an enriched way. And it also brings with it the onset of new business models where people that perhaps do not distribute or do not generate financial services can win this ownership of managing the experience, the consolidated experience in the financial activities of people. We are very much in agreement in saying that this game is raised by raising the bar, bringing more competitive solutions. Eduardo was talking about infrastructure. And for this to be born by thinking of APIs in the industry, where all stakeholders, all players will follow the same technological standards on an even playing field. And as we were saying, where the user now becomes the owner of his or her information, the owner of his election, of managing that interface where it suits him best. And where all of this may be what we have to deal with as a company. And we've tried to create this financial disruption in Latin America. But so far, it was up to us to make inroads in this financial incursion, beginning with payments, and then we continued with the credits, and then we went to investments, and last but not least, insurance. We were doing this, and we had been doing this internally, and I believe this challenge with the new stage that we're moving into is to see how these 4 pillars will now be involved in an industry conversing much more broadly and much more powerfully. And as we just said, with a supply of final products and products that will be much more advisable for the final user, the end user. We see Brazil at the very top with what they've done with Pix, with what they have with Open Finance, with the information to share, with the initiation of payments, with all the insurance part that comes at the end of the year as evolution of that regulation. We saw the ISPE regulation in Mexico, where this whole thing of open banking will be one of the modules that comes into play. We started to hear talks in Argentina, in Chile, in Colombia. So undoubtedly the region as a whole is awaiting to see what sort of a transformation can be seen in our region behind these initiatives. So very excited to follow up what comes in future years and to see how this flourishes in our region. Infinite good things that have happened in regions such as Europe and where we've seen a wonderful transformation. Thank you very much, Paula. This has been very to the point, very interesting, very sharp representation, and you've led a lot of things to meditate on and to ponder upon. And next, we will continue with the next speaker. The other day, I was in my yoga class and I was thinking, why open banking is called open banking when in fact it would have to be called API banking, because it is the essential technology that they use as a base. So today we have with us Jimena Aleman, and she is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Prometeo Open Banking. And essentially, this is one of the offers that the companies that promote open banking in Latin America. And maybe you can answer this question. Please go ahead, Jimena. Thank you very much, Juan, and Diego as well for the invitation and for allowing me to participate in this panel. And going to your question, it seems to me that Open has better marketing than API. The API is a very technical term, and it seems to me that this term open talks about the future we want for finances and for financial markets, a more open market, more open, less technical. And along this way, we will direct the comments that I wanted to share with you today. I would like to kick off this panel by thinking about the biggest channel faced by open finance nowadays in Latin America. As technical experts in this field, we tend to approach or to address this trend from a technological point of view, this digitalization, enhancement, amplification, everything that technology allows us to do, or from the regulatory point of view, how regulations have moved forward, have advanced, and the problems that we have with finance and the regulatory challenge that it represents. However, I do believe that the challenge of open finance is mainly of a cultural nature. I believe that open finance is the structural change that the financial system is facing, the deepest change in the last few centuries. And I believe that it is also a silent revolution. And I like it. I like to think of it this way, because I believe that this is a revolution that places a user at the very core of the financial experience and therefore drastically changes the rules of the game. Because by placing the user at the very center of the financial experience, it has the power to change how users relate with the money. And this in Latin America is extremely powerful, twofold, threefold, because in Latin America, we're very much used to saying that money is scarce, it is difficult to win it, difficult to count it, difficult to manage it. tough it to keep it, to invest it, and to draw the best. And that relation, unsatisfactory relation with money, is something very profound in the Latin American idiosyncrasy. Then it is obvious that this happens because of conditions that in many cases are macroeconomic in nature, obviously. And unemployment, poverty, devaluations, inflation, all of these macro conditions that obviously is part of the private sector. We cannot change, we cannot modify, and they're beyond our control. But I believe that on these macro conditions, a lot of experiences have been built, which are micro moments that we go through in Latin America, and which are not directly linked or directly related to that. And let me share with you an anecdote. During the peak of the pandemic this year, I went to the town where my mother was born during Easter week. And on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, I went for a walk. We have 3,000 people living in that town. It's a small town. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, the only place that had a line outside the door was a credit institution. People were standing in line to pay for their loan and to request their loan. And obviously, I had already heard these anecdotes in other fintech fora where similar experiences have been seen in Colombia and in Peru. But I had not been through this in Uruguay, my country of origin, where I was born, where my mother was born. And this little town in the middle of the countryside in Uruguay. And it really surprised me. I was struck by this experience. So I believe that these are the micro experiences that end up crystallizing a link where money is not only scarce, but it is problematic, it is complex. And this obviously is not something that can easily be seen in access to financial products. So we're not talking about saying that this only happens where someone cannot have access to a bank account. It doesn't only happen with an immigrant cannot send a remittance to their country of origin, Venezuela, Cuba, Argentina. It doesn't happen only in those cases, but it also happens to big corporations when they cannot track the reference number of a transfer. It happens to a company, a cross-border company, when they cannot automate the cash-ins that they receive in their bank account. It happens to a major corporation when they cannot go through with automatic updates in SAP because they cannot track the code where they can track a movement, a banking movement. So there is sophistication in everything that has to do with banking operations, which ends up triggering this very complex situation in which it is very difficult to manage to handle money in Latin America. As I was saying previously, as my role as a fintech entrepreneur, I cannot change all the macro conditions, or we cannot change macro conditions in Latin America in a fintech, but I believe that what we can change is the micro experiences, these micro moments that make us so complicated managing money. And how we can do that? Well, we can do that by generating better financial experiences that will be at the reach of any person in Latin America. And how do we do that? Well, we do it through open finance. What we have to do is to make sure that the user will be at the very core of the experience and that they have the control that they need in order to make available their financial information to third parties, the third parties that need the information to obtain the financial services and products that they need. And this is the essential core of open finance. And I believe that this is the guiding star that we should achieve, an ecosystem, an open ecosystem of innovation, where innovation will obviously be transformed into a better experience with the money for all Latin Americans. From Prometeo 3 years ago, we decided to begin this path of financial innovation, building a platform, an open banking platform, a single point of access to banking information. And nowadays we're providing access to more than 80 APIs in 9 countries in Latin America and openly promoting open innovation. For years, we've seen ourselves as infrastructure because we know that we're empowering digitalization and automation processes for our clients, but above all, because we believe that we are promoting a huge wave of financial innovation, which is the one that will trigger the financial future that we want for all Latin Americans. I believe that undoubtedly, as a region, significant progress has been made. And for those of us who work in this field, it is notorious to see that progress. As Paula was saying, I believe that there is a path that we've covered. And it is quite rewarding because I believe that this is something that we've built amongst all of us. And that can be seen or proven with powerful regulatory provisions, such as the ones that you have in Brazil, with paradigms such as those that you have in Mexico. And I believe that can be seen in the private sector as an open banking platform. We're providing access to information and also beginning payments. And we've seen how the private sector has evolved, and clients from an initial exploratory phase, as could have been the case 3 years ago, they went to look for recurrent cases, which is what we see today, recurrent use of APIs and needs that are repeated from one client to the next, and even sophistication of those needs. So clients that have understood what can this be used for, and they're looking for a use case, specific requirements for information that speak about a maturity in the ecosystem, the open finance ecosystem, which is much greater than what we had 3 years ago. And obviously, without the fears or the uncertainties that existed 24 or 18 months ago. Obviously, there are still challenges to face, and the most important challenge is to have this innovation wave that began in Mexico and in Brazil, and to bring the rest of the countries in Latin America. We're talking about a market that is equal to Mexico and Brazil together. Obviously, we are seeing this happen in Colombia, in Chile. Uruguay also has regulation underway, but it is still waiting to see how this materializes in practice and how it works. But I believe that we are much closer than a couple of years ago. And as we say in Prometeo, we are just lighting up the future. And it is my expectation that in that future, whatever will be achieved will be a better relation with money for all Latin Americas. Thank you very much. It's been a very good presentation, Jimena. And now it will be a pleasure to have with us Federico Suarez, who is the Senior Vice President for Latin America, Open Banking Exchange. It is a guild and a trade union that participated in open finance processes in the UK, and that now is in the region. So I ask Federico to please confine his comments to the 7-8 minutes that there were allotted for this presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Juan. And thank you, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the FintechLAC team for the invitation. This is fascinating because it is the driver for development. And listening to Jimena, to Paula, and to Eduardo, I believe that now it is clear we can see the value of access when providing access to capital. The people that need the most, those who cannot have access to it because they paid to get it, we're working in order to avoid exclusion. It doesn't matter whether exclusion is determined by a lack of access to capital or the high cost of that access. We we have to solve and take care of both factors. That is why it is of vital importance to close the access gaps to financial services by leveraging opportunities offered by open finance. And how do we do that? Using financial innovation technology to reach more people with better products and services, as was well stated by my colleagues. So far, we haven't done this right because of different reasons, and therefore, 1/3 of the region continues facing these problems. And we're here because it matters and because we believe that there are ways of improving these figures. What matters henceforth is that if we want to be more effective, it demands a cooperation amongst the actors and the stakeholders in the ecosystem in order to achieve this. But the change is not so easy, and it does call for work to be done together amongst all stakeholders. That this new environment that is brought by open finance requires profound changes in how we've developed business models, which triggers certain stress. A little more than natural, and it's a part of any changes that we tend to reject usually bring benefits, things that we don't see at the beginning when we get involved in the problem and not in the opportunity. And I bring this to the attention because we're starting with this first stage of open finance, and there's doubt about this new way of processing data and understanding this. Now we're faced with an empowered consumer, aware, interested in products and services that will fill their expectations and their needs. A consumer that begins understanding the value of the disaggregated information, fragmented information that has traits of his behavior as an individual and as a consumer, and that when placed in context will bring with it a lot of value. This consumer is exposed to a mental exercise, constant, confusing, and trying to understand the financial life as a whole without having a standardized vision of it. I don't know whether this happens to you, but at least I dream with that perfect Excel where I enter any input and the daily balance of my life, providing order and efficiency to my days. Some can round up their financial days in your head, but most of the people cannot do that. Now, let us take a look at how we can change that. We could all benefit from different use of our information, consumption, services, and bank accounts, which is not possible nowadays in a generalized way in the region, but it is possible in other places, in other corners of the world. And we even start seeing this in PicPay has Guia Bolso, which is a precursor of open banking in the region, trying to leverage knowledge acquired by this company in the last 7 years and placing at the service of the over 50 million users. It is there where including everyone is important and where open finance come to assist us in order to close the gap so that this will be a reality. We need as a principle to build confidence, and in order to build confidence, it is very important to see the scale, trying to generate options, and in order to generate or to develop by that scale, it is essential to avoid fragmentation, and therefore it is essential to work in a collective fashion in order to avoid many standards and different ways of implementing security and identity. Not doing that has implications, and these implications are translating and putting a halt to implementation and development. Thus, the importance of creating a common language, a terminology that we will all accept, that will not slow down growth. All of these are key elements that enable us to work in favor of access. Cooperation implies a change in mindset to think how together we can grow the market. Each one of the fintech actors, financial entities, service providers, have a legitimate interest in wanting to be strong in their market niches, and this is positive. What we have to do together is how we can have a much bigger market for all. And for this, it is important to define these minimum standards that enable us to follow that greater access. And it is there where we all have to concentrate. I don't have any doubts that this is what we all want. And therefore, we have to reach at the same agreements that allow us to concentrate in a cost-efficient, speedy way on all of these so that we can reach more people. Having said this, I have no doubt that inclusion goes through access. In order to have inclusion, products have to be designed so that everyone can use it. They should be easy to understand and to use. Suffice it to see what Nubank in Denmark has done with 40 million people use these products in Brazil, and they start using them in other parts of the region. In order to include more people, we have to think of issues such as greater access to Wi-Fi in remote areas, taking into account the complexity of our geography and taking into account access for people that can have some sort of a disability. So this means it is very important to take into account the context. Avoiding that limitations in access will reinforce or extend exclusion factors. We see people that have a financial product, and this is a significant statistics. If we want to go beyond the statistics, turning into a real factor for inclusion, we ought to frame it within a context of usability. There's no sense of people receive their payment in their account, and when they go out to lunch, they withdraw everything, their monthly payment from an ATM. In order to reach that objective of reaching more people with the better products, we have to take into account the context in which the services are consumed or used. And for that, we need robust ecosystems in open finance, where we define common standards, governance protocols that are agile and robust, necessary elements for the development of an ecosystem that will protect the security of information of people and confidentiality of people and organizations. No one wakes up in the morning with the need of performing a financial transaction. Now, you can just imagine what this means for a person that still needs transactions in a person or whose understanding or access to technology is limited, and what this implies in terms of time and money. Now it is possible to think of a world where the financial entity or the fintech will do this, will be responsible for doing this in the shadows. Therefore, cases of use begin cropping up, creating conditions that facilitate the life of people, solutions for payment, managing equity, open banking, improved open banking. And with this, I mean direct access to corporate clients and SMEs. And in this, we've identified over 22 cases of use in open banking. And therefore, if we think of the open finance and what will happen when we think of open data, then the number is multiplied. Suffice it today that without standard and agreements amongst all, the risk of falling in the current world of silos is guaranteed and limited usability. Next. What is interesting about this movement of open financing is that it doesn't stop there. Until yesterday, we spoke of open banking. Now we talk about open financing and some work on open data. And this is important because in the life of people, these mechanical activities that don't bring any value but friction should happen behind the scenes, allowing people to devote their day to things that will bring greater satisfaction or benefit. In order to reach at that point that we all want to reach, open means open, and open has the connotation of being visible and having rules and protocols, simple protocols. We will find less friction, and therefore we'll see how usability grows for all. And this it is because of this that it is essential to work for the benefit of inclusion, fighting for cooperation amongst all different stakeholders in the market, seeking to convert the regulatory requirements into operational scalable realities. Next. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a ti, Federico.
Thank you very much, Federico. It's been a very good presentation. I believe that this is a very holistic approach, giving us a view of the entire piece of the land, and particularly linking it to inclusion, because for us as a development bank, it is very important, and the challenges that this entails are also important. The references that you made to communication infrastructures are also the object of great attention by the IDB, and we have a group of people within the IDB, specialists, that devote their activity to that, to promote and expand the connectivity infrastructure with the inclusion criteria and the equality. So thank you very much. And I will now ask Diego Herrera, who's the organizer of FintechLAC and the alma mater of this entire situation, And I have to thank him for this because I believe that without his professional effort and without his professional capacity, this would have not become a reality. So I ask him to please manage the questions because I have to leave. So one more time, I'd like to reiterate the full commitment of the IDB in providing support and the fintech space, because we believe that it will be increasingly more in the future, much more important in sustainable development and inclusive development in the region. Thank you very much, Diego.
Muchas gracias, Juan, y muchas gracias a nuestros panelistas. Vamos a
Thank you,
hacerles.
Juan. And I'd like to thank our panelists. We have one question for each of our panel members, and then we'll move on to the next panel discussion. First of all, and I will follow the same order of speakers. I'll start with Eduardo Coelho. Eduardo, what is Visa's approach to open finance, and why is what you're doing relevant since you're one of the largest organizations and infrastructures in the region? Well, as I was saying initially, first, for a technology company, a tech company, we want to open up all fronts of our network to technology so that all players can develop their own visions through Visa and their missions, and also to keep security of the network. All of the standards need to be robust as well. That's part of our role. Also fundamentally important. And facing adding development capabilities at the front end for the consumers facing the consumers so that we can reach more of the population with our services. Thank you, excellent. And of course, the approach towards Visa's approach towards inclusion is also very interesting because in view of the size of your infrastructure, connecting to fintech and big tech platforms will of course be very important to all. Let me now move on to my dear Paula. Paula, thank you. I have a question for you. And it's a very specific question having to do with Mercado Pago's work. There's a fintech, a Prometeo Open Bank, and just like many other fintechs in the country, they're trying to come into the market, penetrate the market, and operate just like you do. So how can those fintechs and businesses in the region start using technology and the services offered by Mercado Pago? Of course, Mercado Pago is paying close attention to open finance regulations in countries where these standards for integration are they're being put on the table, and of course we're paying close attention to them. But the open API culture predates this integration, and of course it'll depend on how sophisticated, technologically speaking, the user is. So the idea is to provide turnkey solutions for small entrepreneurs and small users, where of course APIs are not the way to go because it would be very costly. But we do have a set of APIs, web hosts, SDKs, where if they have the technological capability to access this more robust integration type of pathway, I mean, we have that through our developer centers or hubs for the information to be accessed. And we are a company that was born really trusting and believing in competition, competitiveness, and that the information belongs to the client, not the company. So we also, always with the consent provided by users, clients can provide access to certain organizations, of course, approved by the client, so that they know that the client is using information through our services to gain access to credit or other products. So open API is available at the development centers or the developer center in our Mercado Pago and Mercado Libre as well. And this has been in place for years. Excellent, excellent. That was a very clear answer. And I think there's a major opportunity there for the whole ecosystem. Now I will move on to another very important player in the system, fintechs. Prometeo Open Banking is doing a great job in that regard through the APIs. Specifically, I have a very specific question for Jimena in that regard. One thing's clear. You, of course, will want to grow in the region, of course. First of all, we'd like to know in which way you intend to grow and how are you dealing with the APIs? Do you store in this? I mean, you use cloud computing. How do you handle these APIs? Is it within the same jurisdiction or in different jurisdictions? Currently, we are providing access to financial institutions in 9 countries in Latin America. We provide banking APIs and also for tax authorities in Mexico, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. In these markets, depending on the market, we have different levels of penetration, but we are quite committed to providing APIs to banks, accounting for 80% of an 80% market share. That's our goal for this, by the end of this year, to be reached by the end of this year. So we're really in full steam. And we're working with Paraguay, Bolivia, and the rest of Central America, especially in Latin America. Now we provide connectivity in Panama, as I was saying, but we're also developing APIs in the rest of Guatemala, of the countries, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and El Salvador. So the rest of the countries in the Central American region to continue to provide this single point of access experience for banking in Latin America. That's our value proposal for our clients. As to what you were asking about how we provide information, of course, we're cloud-based, but as opposed to the architecture that other players have, we do not store information. Information travels from end to end, from the requester to the provider. So the user provides their access credentials and then to the bank, and we never keep it. So for reasons of compliance, our solution is much more in line with the needs of the financial system and those of our clients whose profile is more regulated because they're financial institutions, even large corporations, because all of our architecture was conceived based on the compliance perspective. So we don't store information or credentials. What we do is we just transmit information from one to the other without keeping any of it. Thank you, Jimena. And last but not least, Federico, who's been with us for so many years, ever since I actually had a full head of hair. And I'm losing mine, says Federico. Federico, my question is, you have a great deal of experience and a very holistic and comprehensive view of the market. Many countries are only beginning in the area of open finance. So what is your advice for these countries who are new to the field? What do they need to do to get started? Quite simple. Do not fall into the trap of trying to reinvent the wheel. Think big and have speed in mind. This is a global movement, and holding back this movement locally will only stop growth. If you look you see at technology, you see that each leap is bigger than the previous one, and there's a need to understand technology in a deeper and more sophisticated way. That's why you need to look at success stories, what works, what doesn't, and take some risks, because it's better to make corrections as you go than trying to get it right from the beginning. I think that Brazil is one case that I really like to mention, because we're seeing how an ecosystem is being stimulated and fostered, and how innovation is moving so quickly. It's incredible to see what's going on in Brazil. I'm sitting here in London, and I see how this ecosystem is used as an example on a regular basis. They looked at what was going on in the UK and the rest of the world, and they tried to improve and adjust. Of course, let us adapt things, but let us look at what's working well around the world, and let us not make the mistake of trying to reinvent the wheel. That's very important. And speed is of the essence here, because when it comes to implementation and performance, that's where difference is. Excellent. I think that's those are great thoughts. I'd like to thank all the members of this first panel. There's a lot of food for thought here as to how the whole digital financial inclusion system is evolving throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. There's a lot to think about for the next few years. I would like to invite policymakers in the region to take a look at the videos, rewatch the videos of this event, and think about what's being said. There's so much that can be done to move ahead in this field. So thank you very much. Next, we will move to the second panel discussion, also with several speakers with different points of view. The idea is to supplement what we just heard. Let's hear about public policy to drive open finance in the region. Regulation has been a key element to consolidate digital financial inclusion ecosystems. And this is proven by the research that we have done with the University of Cambridge. We always show a chart, a graph that shows the perception of the adjustment of the regulators in each country vis-a-vis evolution, and the perception is quite good. So there's a good correlation between good regulations and the growth. So we will hear from Rosario Celedon initially, who recently took part in the Fintech task force created by the government of Chile together with the Ministry of Finance of Chile, and who actually led the development and the writing of the Fintech bill, which is an open finance bill in truth. And that is why it's so important to have her here with us today. This is a milestone for the region, a great achievement, as was the case with the FinTech law in Mexico. The bios for all of our speakers will be available in the chat. There will be a link to them to the right of your screen. And with that, Rosario, thank you for being here with us. Your reputation precedes you as a creator of opportunities, thanks to your work with this bill on open finance in Chile. You have the floor. Thank you, Diego, and I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank the IDB and you for all their support with the work that we did, for the work that we did in Chile that has been with Congress on the floor of Congress for a month, and it has already garnered a great deal of support. Today, I don't have very much time to share my presentation with you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your support and also congratulate you for putting this on the agenda. First of all, let me show you that there is a global trend. This is not public policy pertaining to just European countries or developed countries. There are over 50 countries around the world who are pushing these open finance ecosystems. Some of them are more motivated to push for innovation and development of fintech, and others are worried about competition in their countries, and others, like our own, interested in bridging the financial inclusion gap. So there are different models, different approaches, and that, of course, will have an impact on design. In Chile, our focus in terms of public policy was quite clear. And as you said yourself, the idea was to update financial regulations to include fintech businesses, and also to have a regulatory framework that is conducive to open finance. This already exists in the market. It wasn't created by us through our regulations, but what we wanted to do through public policy was to enable the development of these systems. From the standpoint of public policy, what we want is to foster growth and promote innovation, financial transformation in our financial systems, promote competition, bring down entry barriers and information symmetries, and for the benefit of our businesses, and as well as financial inclusion. And for the use of banking services. I think this will be something that you can relate to. We have a broad agenda that has been in place for very many years, with the coordination between the central bank, the regulator, and the supervisor. And there were other bills that were also mentioned in order to enable better financial services. What about personal data, security, and digital identity? Now we have a bill to promote innovation and inclusion, financial inclusion through digital financial services through an open finance framework. What I have for you is some information as to how we arrived at this conclusion. I think it's important for us to come up with public policy that is based on good assessments and good data in order to make headway. And that's where the IDB was so important in helping us with mapping out the state of the art of the situation in Chile, what the fintech ecosystem looked like, and what the cases of use were for open finance. In that framework, we also wanted to see what was the status in terms of adoption of technology in the financial sector, banks and other financial institutions, and what their concerns were. This was turned into a report, which is a white paper that was published by the Ministry of Finance. And I think it's important for those of you who are considering doing this in your countries to read them. This was a roadmap. And one of the things that we took from FintechLAC was this ongoing dialogue with fintech associations and learning about business models. And part of our work was exactly that, to learn about the experiences of different fintechs and how they approached things, what the barriers were for entry, and what they had to offer and to contribute to the system. Also, very interestingly, we looked at international success stories. As we just heard, do not try to reinvent the wheel. That's what Federico Suarez said. The idea is countries were willing to share their experiences, and not just the good, but also what didn't go so well, and also having better competition is all. I think that Latin America in general has been seeing similar things, such as exponential growth of fintech companies, and there's the need for access to data. Also, competition and cooperation with certain financial institutions, pilot plans, business partnerships, or providers for fintechs are vendors for financial institutions, and the segments, sometimes they have the same clients, and they can become a different choice for financial clients. But another interesting thing when it comes to financial inclusion, especially, is to enlarge the coverage of the financial sector to parts of the swaths of the population who are underserved, and also regulations about from the point of view of fintechs and financial institutions, and how this regulatory framework can help advance this public policy objectives. And mainly we asked them about how they viewed open finance, and this is not seen from the point of view of the fintechs in terms of how to improve the scalability of their business model, etc., but also the financial institutions. We heard from them, and many of them are opening up their APIs, and they also see an opportunity in a clear regulatory framework with certain and stable rules, and going from silos to interconnectivity. And this is a public report, and it's available, and we feel it can be useful to other countries that may be considering this. And the point of departure for Chile was very similar to many other countries in Latin America, right? The idea was to speed up digitization and the provision of financial services, and the growing importance of the role played by data in developing a business model, and also in terms of competition, as well as how important this became through COVID from the point of view of users to be able to reach out for them to be covered by financial services, and also this very important thing, and which is to understand that clients own their own financial information, and learning from other countries' experiences, the lessons learned by each country, and also the challenges. And what is the role of regulators? Public policy is not supposed to create open finance, that exists already, but how it can potentialize the scaling up of open finance in terms of incentives, coordination, and cooperation, and competition, and even adoption, or implementation, and not just in order to speed up the whole system and bring down integration costs, always with bearing in mind the client's experience. I think we've talked about this here. The idea is to empower financial clients, that they take control of their financial information, to facilitate the entry of new players, especially for more vulnerable segments, to reduce asymmetries, disparities in information, to provide more security and stability to information exchanges already in place, and generate opportunities for financial institutions and fintechs. These are use cases that we have in mind. We felt that an open finance framework would help in Chile, and this is why, and here it is. But the idea is to have a very specific view of what it is that we want, and a vision of what we want, which business models can be potentialized, and who stands to benefit: SMEs, women, migrants, and how they can access financial services through a better system, and how to potentialize the use of tools for businesses, persons, remittances, and others. And so I will stop here by saying that the conclusion that we arrived at in Chile is to have a regulatory framework that's making it obligatory for financial institutions to provide these type of services, to understand the local market, where the greatest disparities are in terms of information, what the institutional regulatory framework needs to look like, and also to draft a bill. Unfortunately, in most of our countries, there's a need for legislative reform for that to happen. And of course, we need the technical information, and these are implementing regulations that are technical, that are appropriate for the sector, and a clear mandate for the supervisor with the necessary resources to that end. Also, to have a flexible framework. That the state of the art of the discussion is around open data, as Federico was saying, and also not just payment applications, but others, and be able to address the issue of fintech. We have to go beyond just in open data. We have to go beyond that and think about investment, insurance, etc. And also, very importantly, garnering the trust of the client that needs to make sure that responsibilities and liabilities are well defined, and when there is a problem that they have recourse. And a gradual implementation. This is very important. So we need to get on the bandwagon slowly but surely. So I'll stop here, and I am more than willing to entertain questions. Thank you so much for this presentation. I think the goal that you have in mind is extremely clear. As I said, Rosario, it will be very important to see the implementation of the FinTech law in Chile once it's enacted. And of course, the challenge ahead is daunting, but of course, you will rise to the challenge as a country and things will go well, I'm sure. Next, we have Felipe Rincon from MasterCard. I have known him for a long time. Welcome, Felipe, and we are very interested in hearing about MasterCard's vision on this issue. Thank you, Diego. Thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to FintechLAC. Thank you, Susana. I think that we have a lot to share here. First of all, what I'd like to say is that, well, we heard from Mr. Coelho from Visa in the previous panel, and now we're talking on behalf, I'm talking on behalf of MasterCard. One of the issues that makes me think about what we do, you talked about infrastructure. Eduardo talked about a network. I think that's what it's about. We are an infrastructure connecting players within an ecosystem, and we have so much to say as part of the open banking and its challenges. First of all, open finance, of course, is a path, is a step in the right direction. It's a leap in terms of technology, the way we connect and we address problems in finance, which is how to allocate resources, how to resolve issues with information access disparity and technology. And I think that what the IDB is doing is fundamentally important to the region, and it will have a huge positive effect on consumers and will help foster the growth, economic growth and democracy in the region. Even we are committed to being a player that contributes to this huge project that is still a major challenge. One thing I'm still thinking about is what I heard from my friend Federico, and it's such a pleasure to see him, and also Rosario, do not reinvent the wheel. One thing that I like to say in public policy is I like to refer to the rule of thumb. If there's one thing that is a rule of thumb, meaning do's and don'ts in this area, I mean, that's that. And going back to Rosario and her colleagues in the region, not all of this falls squarely on your shoulders. This is uncharted territory, and it's a major challenge. And we're grappling with very complex problems. From the point of view of public policy, what we see is the map of the world, similar to what you showed us, Rosario. There's a similar one which refers to the market-driven concept versus the regulatory framework or model. And there is a paper that came out in August, which is very interesting, and it refers to market-driven interoperability driven by the market. And the question is, what is MasterCard's vision? And so the question is, what is regulatory driven and market driven? So what does that mean? And by looking at what's going on in the region, what Mexico has done, what Brazil is doing, Colombia, and the great deal of time and effort is being invested into understanding this quantum leap. And now in Chile, with the regulatory reform, well, I'd say that regulators have a toolkit, with tools. A screwdriver, a hammer, the pliers, etc. If you take a look at that toolkit, or the toolbox, some of them are more make the regulator more of a player in the market, more of a protagonist, and intervene more, and others that call for less intervention. And as a friend of mine was saying, you sometimes what you do is just overkill. It's not that one tool is better than the other. It depends on what the challenge is. So what's the basic tool? Enforcing the law. The regulations are there. The problem is that they're not enforced. And that's something that came up in a panel discussion about fintech. Of course, regulators can request your data, and financial institutions are under the obligation to provide them. Of course, they need to oblige, and they can also they can also authorize a third party to access our data, and that exists. The regulations are already in place. So to enforce regulations, and then what we call an enabling law. What is that? To just do your job. I mean, your roles. And I loved what Chile said. First of all, who will the players be? There are 4 players in the field, and so I enable them. I give them their roles, their responsibilities. They're enabled. And number 3, and I'll be rigorous with time, but number 3, there's the issue of being a convener. I think that regulators can be conveners. They are the coordinators. They're the ones who bring everybody together. I think that Colombia did a spectacular job there. I was talking to Ana Maria Prieto, a friend there, and about that. And I was saying that in the past, in a past life, I was a regulator. And oftentimes the point of view of the regulator is such that you can tell, you're dragging your feet. And I can tell that's very important for the regulator to do. And I think that can achieve much more than just hard regulations. And then, more regulated self-regulation, more intervention. And Diego, this goes back to what we did. Brazil has a long track record of very, very strong self-regulation. And what regulators say, industry members self-regulate, just do it. I'll take a step back and let you do that, and just support the conclusions stemming from those regulators forum.
And a little bit more to the right, the intervention, the obligations, that is to say, the mandates, you have to do this. And from the outside, I get a bit more nervous, and I believe that this is a way out that has to be used or whenever needed. But hopefully, the industry will move and the regulator will play a role using these tools. And what the IDB was bringing, I will try to finish in these 30 seconds that I have left, what the IDB had on the internet page, and I loved how you defined this open financing. It is a coordination between financial entities and PPPs, a coordination. So we have to see how we coordinate better. When you take a look at these tools, these are the tools. So what are the problems? And I will try to put this in very simple terms. The problems are the standards. I won't say anything about that, the standards. But after the standards, there are 2 essential things. The business case. And the business case has 2 components: how each player in the ecosystem will have a business case so that they can receive revenue, and a sustainable business case that is essential because they have to be financially sustainable, financial entities, and residual risk allocation of residual risk. And what does this mean? Where something goes bad, when you lose money, someone has to assume responsibility. If you send the money, you receive the money, or someone in the middle, the taxpayer, but someone has to take on that responsibility. We have to allocate that risk. In order to have a business case, I have to ensure sustainability of each one of the players and the allocation of the business case in competition, allocation of residual risk. And I will add later during the Q&A, but the key is an ecosystem where there's competition in each role. From the point of view of MasterCard, what do? We manage a platform, and we believe that we can play roles in connecting the different players and ensuring that there's someone that is playing the role of a reputational intermediary. And with this, I finish because I know that we have little time available. Thank you, Felipe. I agree with a lot of the things that you said, but I believe that there is huge will in governments in the region in order to move forward on these issues. Precisely, the Colombian experience is very interesting. Recently, we had a meeting with the superintendency, the financial superintendency, and one of the things that they say is, I would have loved, before regulating, having had an innovation hub, but to talk to the industry and have these business models. And that step is being taken by several jurisdictions in Central America. And I believe that it is quite valuable and important because of what you were saying. The business case is very important. To find out what it is all about is essential to use a toolbox. Good. With this, then, we go to a supervisor who is implementing open finance and who's using that toolbox, as Felipe was saying, and who's already working on all these issues. They've had 2 phases of implementation of open finance, that they're moving on to the third stage of implementation, all the data of credit operations, where from the IDB we will be providing support. And with this, I welcome my friend Gilberto Perez, who, and I can attest to that, has been working for several years on all these issues on fintech and open finance, and has done wonderful work from the National Banking and Securities Commission in Mexico. Thank you, Gilberto. Thank you very much. And please, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Diego. Very kind of you. I don't have the presentation, but I can tell you what we're doing in Mexico on open banking. As you know, this came up in the UK in 2017, around that year. We traveled to the UK from Mexico to see how they were doing this, how they were regulating. We learned a lot. And I have to say that a good share of open banking in Mexico is based on the steps followed by the UK because of what I just said. We went there in 2017. We traveled to the UK to see how they were implementing, because we were developing our fintech law, the Mexican fintech law that was published in 2018, as you know, in March. And one of the issues that is regulated, besides crowdfunding and wallets, these platforms of virtual assets, sandboxes, is the open banking APIs, as was well said by Juan Antonio. It should be open APIs or API banking, some combination of the two, because everything is based on that. It is based on sharing the information in a standardized fashion so that they can communicate better. There's a protocol, safe, secure protocol to share the information. Our fintech law in Article 56 is the one that regulates open banking. The law talks about 3 types of data, open data. This is public information, the location of the branches, the ATMs, the TPBs. So it could be any information that is made available to the public at large. So we started with ATMs, the location of the ATMs and the services offered, in line with what was done in the UK. The standard is almost the same. but they charge different fees. As you know, in the UK, they don't charge any fees because of getting cash in an ATM that doesn't belong to your bank or to your network. In Mexico, we do charge a fee. So that's a main difference between our standard and the one in the UK. That is the fees that are charged. It also talks about an aggregate data, which is statistical information. It could very well be arrears in housing portfolio, mortgage portfolio, information that cannot be disaggregated so that you don't know who the information belongs to. And the most important and interesting information, and we've been working on that for 1 year, it's transactional information. For the client to agree to have access to the information or to provide access to the information, and that's financial transactional information. So we're just starting with transactional collection data, and we will be somewhat different from what they did in the UK because they standardize credit and collection. And so by doing it step by step, a little by little in Mexico, we're doing one phase for collection and one for credit. And this is what we do because another one of the main differences that we have with open banking in the UK is that our open banking covers many more financial institutions, not only banking. We call it finance because it covers all financial institutions. We're not only banks or the largest 9 banks in the country, as it happens in the UK, but in Mexico, financial entities, not only banks, commercial development banks, microfinancial, cooperatives, savings and loan, etc. Fintechs, obviously, mortgage institutions. So we've estimated 2,200 entities, and at some point it will be applicable to then open finance, and that's why we're doing it step by step. We've begun with the entities that have ATMs, approximately 200 financial entities, maybe 150. And we will add to them those that have tapping or collection accounts, 150 entities, and the non-bank banks, as they're known in Mexico, INFOMES, regulated, non-regulated. We have 700 financial entities, and that is why we did it by phases or by steps, so that little by little, we grow the ecosystem and financial entities that will get used to it, and we'll set up the necessary infrastructure. And people will start acquiring and building confidence on open banking. Regulation, as Diego said, we published last year in July 2020, the first phase of regulation, open data, which was explained. It came into force a year later in June this year. Now we're working on transactional collection rates. We've received a lot of comments from the industry, financial, cooperative entities. Next week, I will share this with the public in Mexico, with financial entities, sharing the almost final version, awaiting official comments. It will be uploaded to the Public Gazette in Mexico with a view to publishing it this year, before the end of the year. The second phase of regulation of transactional collection data, and in 2022, perhaps, to work on transactional credit data and aggregate data. We don't have a date for that. We will standardize this. So we're worried about transactional data because the industry itself is requesting these. Regarding the information, it is public. You can enter the SEC page on the provisions. You have the regulations there. And grosso modo, it includes 2 major components. The securities, obligations of data providers, those that have the information, those that have the ATMs, and the applicants, those who request the information. The bigger part is given to data providers because they have the information. We don't want them, through access to the information, to compromise the information of our clients, in spite of the fact that it is open information. And the main change with transactional data is that we will reinforce cybersecurity systems, because we will have access to sensitive information from clients. We now have open information in ATMs. So nothing much will happen if they have access to the information, but in transactional data, it would, because it's information for clients, and that will be the main change. We will reinforce the security of the information. regarding a recurrent issue that I've seen in open banking fora. Open banking, as was mentioned already, it empowers the client. It empowers the user. That's the main benefit. That is to say, obviously, it is more personalized financial products that can be offered. But I believe that the main thing is for financial entities that have always had the control on information, financial operations, etc. Now they will compete amongst them to fight over a client that will empower them as clients, and that's the main benefit of open banking. The main risk that I've mentioned is the security and confidentiality of information, particularly since we're talking about transactional data. Third parties, unauthorized third parties, should have access to sensitive information, names, address, account numbers, etc. A very important issue that is also asked very currently is screen scraping. It's a practice. It continues to work in Europe because they haven't implemented this fully. In Mexico, regulation will not permit it. We will need a different protocol for authentication. I don't know about you, but I was married, and not even my wife had the electronic banking codes. And the same thing with the screen banking. You give the information to a third party that you don't know. And that's why it's a very strict practice that will be allowed. And our main challenge is to publish the information, and particularly to give a maintenance to our standards because they become obsolete. Now we already want a change in the standards on ATMs that was published last year, different from the UK. We don't have a UBI, that is to say, an agency created by law to give a maintenance to the standards. We do it ourselves. It has to go through public consultation, through the public gazette, the official gazette. And with this, I conclude. I hope I didn't take longer. I hope I was clear. And any question you might have, I'm at your service. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gilberto. That was very clear. The process and what you've been doing in Mexico. I believe that there are many lessons, and even Chile could learn from what has been happening in Mexico and all the other jurisdictions as well. No doubt this is the most advanced process in the world, the Spanish-speaking world, in open finance, at least in what has to do with Latin America and the Caribbean. And from that point of view, I believe it is quite relevant to know what is happening with you. Next, we have, last but not least, as they say, our member of the FintechLAC member, Angel Sierra, who's the president of Fintech Chile and president also of Fintech Iberoamerica. And he has a point of view of the industry, non-traditional industry, the Fintech industry, and the incoming industries or institutions that are changing the business models in the industry. Angel, welcome. Please go ahead. And thank you for being here. Hello, Diego. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Loud and clear. Really good, Diego. Thank you very much for this space at Fintech Lab and all the people with us today. Angel Sierra, Executive Director of Fintech Chile, as you were saying, supporting the progress made in Fintech Iberoamerica, an institution that we already considered as a federation. It's a trade union of trade unions, a guild of guilds, and we brought together more than 15 fintech associations in the region to continue empowering this dynamic of democratization of financial services so that they can be within everyone's reach. Please give me 1 minute.
¿Escuchas, Diego?
Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Something is going on with my device.
¿Está pasando mi presentación o se quedó
Can
pegada?
you see the presentation? No, we cannot see it, Angel. We can see you.
Quedó pegada, está en la
We have problems with the technology. So I was telling you that FinTech is a federation where we come together. And nowadays, one of the main messages, and there are three messages that I want to share, but the first one is that the FinTech is everyone. Installing the concept that fintechs are this group of entrepreneurial activity that under a digital optics, they provide financial services, but in fact, that fintech is an ecosystem that is made up by four main stakeholders, the government, academia, which gives talent to all this industry, the investors from all risk capital funds that enable this to become a reality. And last but not least, the country itself, a whole country demanding fintech services. Hello, Ángel. We lost Ángel.
Creo que tenemos un problema técnico.
It seems to me that we have a technical problem where the connection with Ángel is not working. He was disconnected. And so while Ángel comes back to this platform, I will take advantage of this time to start asking some questions. And what I'd like to do, can you see me? Yes. I'd like to begin with Rosario, because Rosario has the most recent experience on regulatory matters. And I believe that it is quite important to ask you, Rosario, what was the most important challenge that you faced when you were putting together the FinTech bill? What was at that point in which you said, this is complicated, and it seems to me that I will have to think of a creative solution, or it doesn't have a solution, or we have to talk this over with more people. What was that point or that issue where you really realized that it was more complicated to put together that bill? Well, the most interesting thing was to define which one of all tools from that toolkit is the one that we had to recommend. As an external consultant, you have that power to give a pure vision of things, and also how to have a convergence of visions within the financial system in Chile. The original position of fintechs in Chile was that they wanted a market-driven model. The more traditional approach was that to the extent that they were not regulated and recognized, it was very difficult for them to exchange data. There was a cultural change, a paradigm change of saying, financial institutions own these data. We've created the databases over time, and the values that we're the custodians of the data. So the most interesting or challenging work was as the team together with the regulators, because what is important is that for the bill to be implemented and enforced later on, it is interesting to turn this into a business model. First of all, we have to understand why it was important to have data, how we're working, how to operate in the market nowadays, and then to turn around and understand the vision of financial institutions, and later on to try to develop this common vision. And I believe that it is positive in Chile, and I hope that Ángel, when he comes back, he can tell us about it, how we put together a working group between banks and fintech to think about how to converge and identify common problems and converge on standards. If the role of regulation is to take that standards later on and to place them in a regulatory field and do enforcement, as Felipe was saying, that would be good news. So it seems to me that this was one of the challenges. The other one, briefly, is something that Federico mentioned, which is time. We're not reinventing a market. The market exists, it works nowadays, and the clients today give their consent so that you can check the data because they're interested in receiving those financial services. So there was this feeling of an opportunity and to move forward and firm steps. So it seems to me that this is something that will be faced by all countries in the region. And to express my gratitude to the regulators in the region, we had the possibility of discussing this with the National Banking Commission, to exchange opinions with Colombia, the central bank in Brazil, and ultimately, fintech is part of a country, but it evolves in the region very quickly. Yes, I agree with you. And I believe that there's work to be done from the bank, from the IDB, in understanding that the dialogue between supervisors and regulators, something that we do behind the policy dialogue. And by the way, it comes from October 19th. We will have a long journey of meetings, and it is there where we have to work a bit more because we do have very good experiences in the region. And while we wait for Angela, I'd like to take advantage and ask Felipe. You spoke of the toolbox. And there's several countries that are just starting to open up and take a look at the tools at their disposal to use them. In your experience, what would be the first tool that a regulator should use in order to begin working on this open finance system? What would a regulator do? Well, it seems to me that the first thing is the diagnosis. What is already being done by the industry? It is very interesting to see that business people are very creative, and in our country, we have a lot of creativity. And there are things that are already working and that are working quite well. And before going to the toolbox, the first tool is a map, the map of what is happening. And on that map, the regulator has to step back a little to take a look at what's happening. Not only open finance is one piece of the forest. In order to cultivate open finance and for it to grow, we have to see it as a tree, as part of a larger forest. We're a company that is in the world with traditional credit cards, but we're also giving due values to account and also in open finance. And the reality is that we are in this market because markets are multi-risk, and regulators have to think with a vision of a multi-rail market where open finance will be one of the rails, and it could be one of the important rails or one of the important streams. But we have traditional players. We have credit cards that are traditionally being used, account-to-account services. And I see this in a way from the point of view of public policy transportation. You have the car, the bus, and the bicycle. It's not that one is better than the other one. They're different with different values. And for one leg of the road, one is better than the other one. So you need to see the map, see that you have different rails, and to see that the other rails are also evolving because technology is changing everything. When we speak of interoperability, we have to realize that when we speak of interoperability, you think a lot about how two payment systems will be connected. But the fact is that interoperability nowadays is taking place through cell phones. Zoom failed today. When I wanted to connect, it failed. They said that I had to call my systems unit. So I used a cell phone. And if I had not had the cell phone, I could have been able to call with a landline. So what I would say is that in that toolbox, and this has to do with your question, Diego, you have to take a look at everything that is going on, the different streams that are participating, and always building a business case. And something else that I want to say here is that this is like a sculpture. And when you're working on a sculpture, and I haven't done it, but I can see the artist that is sculpting it, you have to take a look at the different angles. You have to take a look at the back of the sculpture, the front. And in the back, you're doing wonderful things in terms of innovation. Some have their own fintechs. So we have to take a look at this side of it. And the pilots, I love that, the sandboxes. It is there where things have to be put to a test. So I would say that before using the tools, the map shows us what is going on. Excellent, Felipe. I believe that we're very much aligned, and that is the vision of what we've done in FintechLAC. Gilberto, I wanted to ask you a question. We have a lot of questions from the participants, and we won't have enough time. But one of the questions has to do with open data. How do you deal with open data from the point of view of implementation of what you're doing, in the National Banking and Securities Commission of Mexico. Yes, Diego, as I mentioned last year on June 4th, that this was published. The regulation has two components. The general chapter regulates the provisions of regulators. They have the ATMs and those who request third parties, applicants, anyone who can get connected to the API of the bank in order to learn about the services offered. And that comes in the annexes. We have two annexes. One, the data standard, security data, and the architecture data. Financial entities that have ATMs are mandated to implement it, and those who consult the information would have to download it from the webpage of our commission. They're called general provisions applicable to API. That's the name in Spanish for APIs. And those who may want, I can leave the link on the chat if you want to download it, but you just have to abide by the standard that we published, and banks are mandated to provide the information. Something that I did not bring up during my presentation, but which is also very much applied to the Mexican case, is the possibility for the banks to charge a fee for consulting the data. And this was done like this when we created the Fintech law, because there was a lot of reluctance in the beginning to implement this issue. So we gave financial entities the possibility of charging for having access to the information. And these fees have to be based on costs. Part of what we have in transactional information and the way we share transactional information that will be made known next week includes the way, the standard, the formula to estimate these fees. And this is a very complicated issue because, as I mentioned, it only happens in Mexico that you have the possibility of charging. It is not mandatory. Some banks will do it, some institutions will do it, others will not. If you want to do it, we'll publish the way in which you can do it. And if, as applicants for open data, you want to have access to the information on ATMs, you have to download the standard that I mentioned, and perhaps you can charge a fee. So far as I know, it hasn't been charged, but for transactions, they will charge this fee. So we'll see how this works of charging this fee, but we have to abide by this public regulation. Excellent, Gilberto. This is one of the issues that we've brought to the attention in our discussions. And it is that open finance is the translation of open data in the financial world. And that also implies coordination, significant coordination with identity authorities, with authorities in telecommunications, and all the issues that have to do with infrastructure and information. So it is quite relevant to deal with open data. Angel, I don't know whether you can hear us. Hello?
Diego, hola. Sí, acá estoy.
Diego, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now? I wonder whether you could wrap up your presentation with, of course, just give us the gist. We've done the Q&A session already while you were grappling with those tech problems. So could you please proceed? Thank you. I continue to have connectivity problems. I will not be able to open my, to turn on my camera, unfortunately. I'm having some issues. So open finance is a must. We most definitely, we have done our job in Chile. We submitted a market-driven proposal for open finance, and that didn't work. So naturally, the recommendation for countries is to go for a bill, for a law to allocate resources to the regulators. That in Chile we have 230 fintech companies, and in 3 years' time, at this rate, there will be 500 of them. A regulator without staff and without the resources to manage this large ecosystem could be dangerous. Not having a strong enough regulator. Then not to reinvent the wheel, as we heard, and I'd like to congratulate Rosario and her team at the Ministry of Finance on that fintech bill. And Fintech Iberoamerica would like to congratulate her on that very comprehensive bill with very few still gaps to be bridged for financial inclusion to be attained. And the work is done. It's not available in Portuguese, but it's in Spanish. It's not just like the Brazilian example. It's a document that has already been published by the Banking Association and to see how to do this. And the bill is with Congress now, but still there's time before that is enacted. So the private sector needs to take over. And we have material available to work with. And let me make an important announcement, by the way. We're only weeks away from publishing the Open Finance Standard by Fintech Iberoamerica. We are a federation, as I said, and we are actually acting on this and bringing this to the attention of governments and tell them about what open finance regulations should look like and how to implement them. And also maybe from a regulatory standpoint, and the private market can also start working with this, because open finance is not outlawed or banned. Data property is something that is recognized, and now all it has is a name. And this is in place in Chile, and it has been in place for 7 years, and it's being done with scraping, excuse me, for all this time. But I think forbidding, banning scraping in our view is very, very dangerous. It's the dilemma of the lift and the stairs. When you create a structure, you need 2 ways to go up and down. Otherwise, you have no contingency plan, and that if you lose one or the other, then there will be an interruption in financial services. Globally, the experience is such that there are banks that have sabotaged the implementation of open finance. So the APIs that they provide are not do not have the quality that is needed, or the information, do not provide the information needed. So a third party should be able to obtain those data through scraping and through the open finance dynamics, and for it to continue to work. As we all know, every financial system needs a contingency plan, and if the API does not work, there should be an alternative. So there should be both stairs and an elevator, as I said. And finally, financial technology, not just fintechs, but financial technology in general for Latin America. 2 days ago, The Economist published a story saying that about 50% of venture capital investment in Latin America is fintech, and that will continue to grow. And the reason for this is that there are huge gaps in terms of financial inclusion. And if we have 2,400 fintech companies in Latin America, I am sure that there will be 5,000 in 3 years' time. So it's a tsunami, a rapidly advancing tsunami. So you can do 2 things. You can either wait for it to take you over, or else you can prepare ahead of time by building infrastructure and maybe even a funnel for for a hydroelectric plant to be created, and thus harness the power of hydroelectric power coming with a tsunami and make that work in our benefit. But it's necessary to do what Chile did with regulations, with the standard, with the guidelines for open finance, so that the private sector can take over while we wait for the regulations. In the interest of all, for innovation, for financial innovation and inclusion. I'm sorry I had to hurry up, but unfortunately I have run into technical issues. Thank you, Diego. Thank you to the FinTech team and all of the associations and all of them, all of the members of FinTech Iberoamerica and to FinTech Chile. Thank you, and we fully understand it happens to the best of us. And we are out of time. I'd like to thank all of the members of this panel, Rosario, Felipe, Gilberto, and Angel. Thank you. We will continue to work in the interest of the region. We will continue to have meetings, and to all of the supervisors and regulators here with us, you have our support. We will continue to work on the development of the digital finance ecosystem in the region. I think we need to leverage the experience of countries who are far ahead, such as Mexico and Brazil, so as to apply them in your own jurisdictions, and maybe a regional ecosystem might be an option to consider. I'd like to thank FintechLAC's steering committee for facilitating this webinar, and the Partnership for the Private Sector, which is also a part of this initiative and has allowed us to have these two market infrastructures here with us, that Visa and MasterCard, with a presence throughout the region. Thank you again, and we will continue moving forward and working together using the questions sent in by the audience. They will be forwarded to our panel members and also posted on our website together with the answers to them. Thank you once again to everyone, and we will be in touch. Thank you. Thank you. And goodbye. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Goodbye, and thank you to our audience. Thank you and goodbye.